Boys, it's Shiro here, and I got to thinking, what's more fun in your favorite game than doing a tier list? So here we are. I'm going to be doing a tier list on the artifacts in Pathos today. It's unscripted, so forgive any trails of thought, but I do have my ideas for where I want to rank these things already kind of laid out. As you can see, I have my tiers set up. And full disclosure, there's going to be two items we are not going to be ranking today. That's going to be the Ancient Katana, because it really is just a pathway to either Masamune or Muramana. So I don't see a point in ranking it, because if it did get ranked, it would just easily go here. It's one of the worst swords in the game by itself, but it can be enchanted to one of the best swords in the game, so. And the other being Pandora's Box. I am going to be honest, I have no idea how to rank this item because I don't know what the averages are, but I'm sure you could rank it if you really wanted to dig into it and find out what your average is for return on value opening it. But for today's video, I'm not going to be ranking it. Today we're going to be starting off with Aura Gauge. Now, I'm going to give a brief overview of what all of these do before saying where I think they go and why. So Aura Gauge is heavy armor, so there's a small speed debuff to it, but you also gain warning and deflection, which are two of the best talents in the game in my opinion. And you have to remember it can also go to plus 10, so it's heavy armor 2, but it can go to heavy armor 12, so it's a very, very strong piece of armor with two great abilities. That being said, I don't think that it's S tier, simply just because of the speed debuff. I think the speed debuff keeps it from being S tier, but I think it goes top of A+ tier, easily. Next item on the list is going to be Blenderog. Now this one has a little more to talk about. Blenderog is also heavy armor 2, same stat line, but you gain rage. Not great. Permanent rage means that anything you walk past, you are forced to fight. So you're more than likely going to be using this item as like a pop it on, fight something, take it off. Pop it on, fight something, take it off. You're not going to be leaving this on, so if it's cursed, it's literally unusable. This item is one of those that cannot be used at cursed. It also cripples your intelligence and your wisdom, and your charisma, so you can't really have a party. You can't cast spells or anything, so this is just the put it on, swing a stick type of item. Boosts attack and damage both by enchantment, so you're almost always going to be hitting if this thing is at plus 10. You're going to be hitting for a lot if it's at plus 10. There's not many combats you're going to lose 1v1 while wearing Blenderog. Even like fighting multiple enemies, if you just pop the autoplay on, Blenderog you're going to be fighting pretty solid with them. You're going to have to ignore my bird in the background. She's part of the unscripted. So, I think personally, Blenderog's a very strong item. But I think that the downside of having rage is just too much. I think having to take a turn to put it on, so say you open a door, then you see you're in a fight, and then having to put it on, or having to put it on before a boss room, and then basically running the boss room without spells, I think really hurts this item. So because of that, I put Blenderog in B tier. It's got uses, but it's not too strong. It's not weak. Its use, its niche case, is too strong to rank it any lower in my opinion. And then going on to the next item, we have Broomstick. And here you're going to see a lot of what I think personally the A tier is about. I think A tier are artifact items that are just the best item of their class, but don't offer much beyond that. So you don't gain anything crazy in terms of resistances, you don't gain anything crazy in terms of talents. I think these are just strong because they're an artifact weapon, which obviously they're going to be coded to be stronger than your normal run-of-the-mill staff, and Broomstick I think is the epitome of that. Broomstick does 2 to 12 for staff. That's quite a lot. With the max plus 10, you've got light armor 11, so if your dexterity is high, you're going to be pumping out armor with this thing. And you gain quickness and see invisible. Neither one of those is super broken. Quickness is definitely up there in terms of talents. See invisible, pretty lame. So, to me, this item is just, you gain quickness if you don't already have it. In a lot of ways, you're already going to have it. And it's got animate as a mount. And once you animate it as a mount, it becomes useless. So it's functionally just a staff that gives quickness. and it hits harder than Battle Staff by a lot. So because of that, I ranked Broomstick also in the A tier. I don't think it's A plus tier. I think Aura Gauge and the other items I have in A plus tier are just stronger than Broomstick. But if you're going to be using a staff, that you should be using Broomstick if you find it. Coming up next, the item we all know is going straight to our first S tier, the Carapace. Heavy armor, but it's heavy armor 10, unenchanted. So this is heavy armor 20 at max enchant. Who cares about a speed debuff? That's 20 extra defense. You gain 100% in 2 resistances, being Petrify and Poison. Poison, granted, is not the strongest resistance. Poison's one of the easiest resistances to gain. You don't really need to worry about an armor giving you poison resist. But the Petrify resist is nice. Petrify is one of the hardest resistances to get. And on top of that, you gain both Vitality and a boost to your Constitution of up to plus 10. So if you get this off Gnome King, or somewhere early in your game, this is just free health throughout your entire run. You pop this up to plus 10 and you're getting plus 5 health per level up just from wearing your armor that already gives you so much. Easy S tier. Don't think we have to talk about it much. Next item that I think is quite interesting is going to be the Chaos Hammer. Now, I ranked Chaos Hammer maybe lower than other people would. I'm not sure. I've not asked a lot of players what they think about the Chaos Hammer. There are 5 possibilities. It either explodes fire, frost, electric, acid, or magical. Now, in my opinion, the best explosion you can get would be the Frosty explosion, just because you have 50% chance of transient paralysis for 2 to 5 turns. And I think paralysis is by far the strongest transient you can hit off of this. Transient sleeping, not super important. Transient confusion from the acid hit, kind of nice. Transient stunned, second best. Transient blindness, probably the worst one in my opinion. Doesn't help you with anything. It's not long enough of a blind that you're usually going to be able to get out of vision. It's just all of these are just 2 to 5. So in terms of what it helps you do, the 2 to 5 blind is not usually enough to run away. So what is that? 2, maybe 3 out of the 5 you can possibly hit that it will help you in some way, shape, or form. And it does 2 to 8 as a thrown weapon, so it's decently strong. Especially plus, enchant this thing up to plus 10, that's 12 to 18 on a thrown weapon. The problem is, you only get the 1. It takes up a quiver slot for 1 item that you can only throw once, that you have to pick up to throw again. So I really don't like items like that in combat. I don't like just throwing 1 item to initiate a combat and going with it, especially when that 1 item only initiates a combat like 3/5 of the time. I think sometimes you're going to throw this at something stronger than you, and you're not going to get something that helps you in the combat. And I think worst case scenario, I've not encountered it, but I think there may be things that pick this up and throw it back at you, and that would be a nightmare scenario if they threw it back at you. So because of that, I have ranked this in the B tier. I think it's another item like Blenderog, where it's got really high upside, but also really high downside. Next up we have Chasm Edge. Now Chasm Edge is an interesting item. You are swinging really hard. 4 to 16 is pretty strong. And that's base. 25% of the time you're doing an extra D6 or D8, depending on if this thing is blessed or uncursed. It harms you if it's cursed, but normally you're not going to be using artifact items cursed anyway. This is when you just strictly cannot, because you're going to be hurting yourself some of the time. And it also has one of what I think are the strongest zap abilities in the game. It creates a spiked pit for 25 karma. So that's free damage, and you can run away from anything that's not levitating or flying. So it's a get out of jail free card in a combat you can't win. So because of that, I personally ranked this in the A+ with Aura Gauge. I think this is a very strong sword, because if you're not winning the combat with the raw damage the sword provides, just boop, gone. Easy. Easy A+ tier. Next item I have is Cleaver. Cleaver is very boring. It's just a very strong axe. That's it. Doesn't do anything special. You boost your attack by enchantment. So you're 3 to 18. 13 to 28 with a plus 10 to attack is your maximum with this weapon. This kind of falls into that category of weapons that I said earlier, like Broomstick, where it is just the strongest variant of that type of weapon. I think Axe is just the axe to use if you get it. Moving on, Colossal Excavator. This item I think is pretty rough. It does 7 to 18, which is a lot of damage, but you have to be skilled in pick. And I know what you're saying. You can get skilled in anything if you wait long enough. But what do you do if you find this in a run where you're playing something that's not skilled in pick, can't carry a lot, and it's early in your run? This is just now carried as your pickaxe slot. That's what this is. It's got a better dig than pickaxe. You gain tunneling talent if you wield it, just like every other pickaxe, so it's nothing special. And versus stone, you do 14 to 36, but how many stone enemies are there really? So I didn't like this item a lot. I think it's worse than Blenderog and Chaos Hammer, but I don't think it's as bad as the other item I ranked in C tier, so because of that, I put it in C plus tier, with the items that are almost viable in my opinion. I don't think you're ever going to be using this intentionally over anything else you find in your run, so C plus to me was the almost viable tier. Coming up next, we have one of what I think is one of the strongest items in the game, and it's not close. Creeping Sprout. I put Creeping Sprout all the way up in the S tier, right behind Carapace, because it gives you so much value. It weighs 0.15 pounds, which you have to think, if you're wielding a bow or sling or anything that uses your quiver, a lot of times you run into a problem where your quiver, you have to weigh how much you want to carry for combat versus what you are willing to not carry for the weight. That was poorly worded, but I think you see what I'm saying. Like, you have to gauge how much weight you want to be carrying just for combat. Creeping Sprout solves that problem. It has infinite quantity. You also gain Warning talent. Warning is, in my opinion, one of the best talents in the game. It allows you to see ahead, and that's all it does. Warning says, hey, this room might be dangerous. You don't have to worry about kicking a door and running into something. You don't have to worry about, if you're in a one room, like if you're in a maze or a labyrinth, you don't have to worry about, kicking the door, finding a unicorn early if you have the Creeping Sprout or Warning equipped. Warning's just such a good talent. On top of that, you gain sleep resistance, which is a little rough to get occasionally. If you don't run into lots of tsetse flies or lemurs early, or even, there's like 3 enemies early that give sleep resist, but it's not easy to get because you have to already resist poison to eat the things that will give you sleep resist, so it's a decent resist to get, but the main thing this gives is infinite quantity and Warning. I think the combination of Warning and infinite quantity on something so light is just insane. And it's also got decent damage with Bow Pierce 1 to 6. Plus it goes to plus 10. You can go 10 to 16, 11 to 17. My math sucks. 11 to 16 on an arrow that gives you an infinite quantity and Warning. Just easy S tier item. Next is one of my favorite artifacts, but it's not very good in my opinion. I think it's better than a lot of the things you could be using, but not really worth it when compared to another item that takes up both hands, and that's Deadwood. I ranked Deadwood in the B tier. 2 to 12 was a lot of damage, but you're going to see later in the list, pretty soon, there's a better item that does the same damage and also doubles when mounted, but just has an infinitely better effect. Deadwood has 100% drain resistance, which is good, but there's not a whole lot of enemies that drain you. The ones that do are strong. You run into a Wraith early with this, easy clap. Run into a Wraith early without drain resistance, and he's probably going to kill you. So you've got decent damage. It's pretty high damage, let's say it that way. But it's not the best item with that damage line. There is a better item. You do 2 to 8 versus Vegetable, which is like a funny addition that never matters. When it's Blessed, you have a 25% chance to drain 2 to 8, and when it's Uncursed, you drain 1 to 6. It also backfires on Cursed. Once again, though, you're not going to be using these items Cursed unless you blind equip them. So, 25% chance to drain just a little bit is fine. You do a little bit more damage, but I don't think it's super important. I think overall this is just hit hard with drain resistance if you have Polearm. And you have to be mounted to get max damage. So there's lots of times that your build is just not going to facilitate using this, because there are times you're not going to want to be mounted. Moving on, we have the Deagle. Everybody knows you have to keep the strap on you in the dungeon, and once again, this is just an item I've thrown into the A tier because it is just, if you're gonna use a gun, why not carry the hand cannon? I will not elaborate further. Moving on. Dire Needle. Dire Needle is an interesting item to me. Does 1 to 10 for a medium blade, which is pretty decent, and you have a 25% chance to drain, just like Deadwood. I think this item, in particular, is pretty bad. I think that you're almost never going to be main wielding this. I think this item finds an interesting niche as like a dual wield item. If you're dual wielding, the drain roll is okay. You just slap it in your second hand and don't worry about it. Sometimes you heal off of it. But I don't think it does enough to justify main wielding this item. So because of that, I threw this with Colossal Excavator. It's just one of those items that's not strong enough. There are items that I would rather use than Dire Needle. Even if I don't find another better artifact, a lot of times there are just base weapons that I'm going to be using before I use this. But even just thinking in terms of blades, there's another medium blade in the artifacts that's stronger. There's lots of heavy blades that are stronger. I would almost rather just slap a heavy blade item on and train up heavy blade than use this, or if I'm using medium blade, use something with a better effect than drain, and it doesn't give you any resistances like some of these other items do. Overall, I think it's pretty weak. Moving on to one of my least favorite items, the Dragonbane. Dragonbane, I think, is overall fairly weak. It only does 2 to 10 off of Heavy Blade. You do an extra 2d4, so 2 to 8, versus Dragons, which isn't that strong. Dragons already have a bottomless health pool once they start to get older. Why would you want an extra... I mean, it's extra damage, of course you'd want it, but why would you want something that small if you're going to be using the weapon specifically to fight them? It's a one-handed weapon, so 2 to 10's not terrible, but there are other items, again, that in one hand do more than this. And when it's 25% of the time, you're going to be getting a fear on dragons. I would almost rather not get the fear on everything except for, like, your biggest dragons, because most of the time I'm just going to want to fight them and kill them. And that's if I'm playing a run where I didn't do Blessed Genocide on dragons to not have to deal with Chromatic Dragon. So overall, sometimes you're going to be hitting something, and you have to think too. You're having heavy blades, so often you're going to be running heavy armor as well. You're going to be playing a class like Knight, Templar, stuff like that, where you're going to be running heavy armor too, so your speed is going to be lower on average. So you're going to pop a dragon with fear, and it's going to fly 40 spaces away from you, and you're going to have to chase it down to kill it. So it's got almost a downside with fear sometimes. I mean, if you corner them, it's great. If you corner them and pop the fear, then they can't hit you. But a lot of times, if you're fighting a dragon in the open, especially in the lower floors where this thing is going to be useful, where there's more dragons, there's going to be a lot of open space for dragons to just bounce. So for that, I put this item in C tier. I think it has no niche. I think there are just objectively better items. Revisiting our discussion about Deadwood, the item that's 2 to 12 with wield in both hands and double when mounted that I think is better is the Drill Lands. Drill Lands gives 100% shock resistance, which I personally believe is more common than drain resistance. It's going to keep you from getting stunned, which is, again, more important than drain resistance. I would rather take damage than be stunned. And it has harm for 1 to 6 or 1 to 8, depending on Uncursed or Blessed. Also has a backfire. So you're doing more damage overall than Deadwood. You have a better resistance than Deadwood. Pretty good. But on top of that, you have a 20 karma ability that gives you one of, if not, the most insane trap in the game. Trap hole. You can literally dig to the floors below. So you can use this for multiple things. You're fighting something, put it in a hole. Zap it with a hole, put it on the floor below you. Fight it later. You want to get away, but you don't want to put the monster to the floor below. You're surrounded. Zap yourself. Straight down. Fall straight down. Now, they can follow you down the hole, but it's a quick get out of jail. Not all of them are going to follow you down that hole, first of all. You might have a way out. Second of all, if it was just the one and you've put them on the lower floor, you've effectively removed the threat. So because of the high damage of this item, being exactly the same as Deadwood, with an upside, with the effect to create a trap, and mostly just because of the trap, I ranked Drill Lands in the S tier. I think being able to create a hole, and keep in mind it is, as far as I'm aware, the only item in the game that can create a hole. I think this item goes straight to the S tier. I think it fills a niche that no other item can do. You cannot tunnel through forest like that with any other item, and on top of that, it does insane damage, especially when mounted. Moving on to a controversial opinion I have. Our only F tier item on this list, and in my opinion, the worst artifact in the game by far, the Escapist. I'll let you think about that one for a minute. You get displacement, stealth, invisibility, phasing, free action, conflict. Those are all really good. Great abilities. Everybody's going to be fighting each other. They can't see you. You're not going to wake them up. It's hard to hit you. You can walk straight through walls and you can't be stunned. Now here's where it becomes a problem for me. This item is exclusively for running away. Exclusively for running away. But you gain fear, so you can't fight back. Now you may think, but I can cast spells. You gain silence. Can't cast, can't fight back. You also gain hunger, so while you're wearing this thing, you are burning nutrition. And it boosts your dexterity and speed by enchantment. So it just further increases the fact that you can run away. There's so many better ways to run away than Escapist. Think about it this way. When are you going to be using this? You see an enemy, you walk up to them. When are you going to be using this? If you are walking up to an enemy that's stronger than you, to the point that you need to put this on to run away, you could easily have just farmed a little more. Easily just be a little stronger. There's no reason to be in that situation in the first place, in my opinion. I think if you put yourself in that situation in the first place, you've already misplayed. Other times you might be thinking about using this. Well, what if you're getting surrounded? Well, you better hope you're not already fully surrounded, because this doesn't let you walk through entities. So what you're going to do is put this on, everything has conflict, and they might still try and hit you. You're not immune. So you have to hope that if you're surrounded, they free a hole for you by scrapping with each other that you can run out of. Granted, if you do get this thing on, you are almost guaranteed to get away. But I don't see any use case where you're going to be wanting to need a guaranteed getaway. That's not something simple. Like, in every situation that I can see this working, Wand of Teleport, Scroll of Teleportation, Teleport Away, run through a door and Wizard Lock, all of those things work for me. Before I'm wanting to burn an artifact slot on Escapist. Every time I see this, I'm sad, because I would rather have had any of this that I can use and have fun in my run. This just does not have enough use to me. Moving on. I have Aethiopica. Telepathy, Mana Regen, and Teleport Control. I think this item is very good. I think there are better amulets to wear, so for that, I ranked this into the A tier, because I think there's even a better amulet in the artifacts. I don't think it's equal to the other amulet artifact, Philosopher's Stone, to be ranked any higher. I think I'll put it top of A tier, though. I think it's better than the items that are just items. But it's one of the only ways to get mana regen that's not a race. Overall, telepathy's pretty solid. I like having telepathy. And having teleport control never hurts. It's not great. You have to have either a way to make yourself teleport, or it just prevents traps. That's mainly what I think about it as when you have teleport control, but you don't have a way to make yourself teleport. Is you can step on teleport traps and it's fine. Not much to talk about with this item other than decently strong. Moving on, Eyes of Ra, gain Dark Vision, gain Clarity, and gain Clairvoyance. Clairvoyance, in my opinion, is one of the strongest abilities, and Clarity is, if not one of the strongest, it's up there of all of the Glass's abilities. I think Clarity is just insane. Being immune to the things Clarity makes you immune to, that being hallucination, amnesia, just comes in so handy throughout your entire run. If you find these, you're never wearing another pair of glasses. There is never a case where I see you wearing another pair of glasses. So for that, I rank these easily S tier. we're getting to move through the quick ones easy. Giant Slayer, another case of just the best of that item. Threw that in the A tier. So, Sling Bludgeon 1 can go to plus 10, just like every other artifact. But you have Burst Rate 2, Attack Mod 2, and it boosts your Strength by enchantment. I don't think it's great. I think there are other better items to put in your hands. But if you're gonna use Sling, this is the Sling. Grimtooth is an interesting item in my opinion. I think this is one of the best offhand items in the game. I don't think there's a way to justify wielding Grimtooth in your main hand, but I think if you want to dual wield and throw this in your offhand, it's very good. Gives 100% poison resistance, which, as we've discussed, is good, but it's not great because it's so easy to gain poison resistance otherwise. It will harm poison 1 to 8 on hit, so you're really doing 2 to 14 if they don't resist poison. And if they don't resist poison, you can decrease their strength. And if it's blessed, you give poisoning as well, which is quite nice. Overall, I think it's solid, but there are better items, even in the niche case that you're just wanting this as an offhand. So for that, I stuck it with the other items that you can kind of use, but aren't great in the B tier. It's viable, but not the best thing you could see. Moving on to another very, very good item, the Harbalist. Harbalist is a crossbow, so it's not going to be the most common thing you see used. Gives burst rate 2, so it's just like the sling, you're firing twice as fast. Crossbow bludgeon 1 to 6, so it's about average on damage, but it can be enchanted higher. Attack mod plus 2, so you're hitting more often, which is great when you're firing twice as fast. You gain 100% magic resist, which is what really puts this item over the top for me. There's not a lot of magic resist in the game. Can't get it by eating a whole lot. Mostly Scroll of Devours on items is what's going to get you your magic resist. Can't gain it from a whole lot of armor. So it's just, magic resist is one of those that if you have it, it's very nice. And on top of that, you get invisibility and stealth. So it's easy to move around the dungeon, easy to escape fights, and you're going to be fighting at range. The only annoying thing is that invisibility can sometimes make it hard to kite, because enemies are not going to follow you for nearly as much as they would before. So because of that, I left it out of the S tier. I think if it didn't have invisibility and it had some other better talent, like quickness or something, it would be easily S or S plus tier. But because it's going to be hard to kite with it, I left it in the A plus tier with Aura Gauge and Chasm Edge. Moving on to Illuminaire. Illuminaire is an interesting item. I think of the two light sources that you can employ, being Prudentia and Illuminaire, as an artifact, I think it is less good than Prudentia. But I think that its main two abilities, I think the Flash with Transient Blindness is okay. Occasionally that's going to help you escape, and it costs Malnutrition, so that's not great. You're going to be burning Nutrition. I would rather spend Karma than Nutrition personally, especially early game. That's for your Flash. Your Zap is going to light the area, so it's Malnutrition for light, which, not great, but it gives Transient Fear when blessed, and when it's uncursed, it gives Transient Fear to the undead. So this thing is functional, and especially so when blessed, as a getaway item. And where I think this item is most important is its Scry reveals the level for a range of 20 when blessed and 15 when unblessed. And it reveals everything. I think that's where this item really shines, is as a better crystal ball that doesn't weigh 15 pounds. And because of that, and because it is exclusively to me, just a better crystal ball, I didn't rank it as high as I thought some people might consider this item. I stuck this item in the B tier with all the other niche use items. That's an item I'd be open to having a discussion about whether it's better or worse. Moving on to another one of my least favorite items, the Lashing Tongue. It has the standard transient stun 3 to 18 that all whips have. It does less damage than Mithril Whip, but can be enchanted higher to do more damage max. So it just has the maximum damage of the whips. So my brain's already screaming, B tier, B tier, B tier with this thing, right? Just, best whip. Why would it go anywhere else? The only thing for me that puts this item over the top of B tier is that 10% of the time you're going to charm what you're attacking if it's living. And I think that is objectively stronger than what these items do. Except for maybe Blenderog, but I think that this item doesn't really have a downside unless, you charm something you didn't want to, but that's not really as much of a downside as, popping this thing on Cursed and killing your run, you know? So, I think in terms of that, like, you can blind equip this, you can't blind equip this. You can never blind equip Blenderog, you can always blind equip Lashing Tongue. I don't think it's bad Cursed. Even Cursed, it still has its charm effect, it doesn't have a backfire. Like, sure, it's kind of rough, but you cannot blind equip Blenderog. So for that, I had it originally right here. But when I started thinking about it, I think it's just slightly better than all of these, and it is just, again, this is the tier of the best in that class, just because it's an artifact. Moving on, we have an interesting item, the Magistrator. Magistrator is a mace that does absurd damage. Magistrator hits for 4 to 14, and once again, Magistrator gives you the ever-elusive magic resist at 100%. It has a 25% chance to punish. Not going to matter a whole lot, because you're going to be punishing enemies. It can be cool if you get Psychosis or Ignoramus versus things that read or zap. Or my favorite to get is Ball and Chain. I love getting Ball and Chain. Just for the slow that it gives, especially if it encumbers what you're fighting, and occasionally you'll smack something and the Ball and Chain will just be too heavy. So for that, I put this in the A tier. A plus tier, I mean. I think it's better than the A tier items. I don't think that Magistrator is just another good weapon. I think the Magic Resist puts it above, just like Harbalist. I think the Magic Resist really pushes these two items into another tier than just being the best item in that tier. Moving on, we have the first Ancient Katana upgrade, Masamune. Beautitude, so you are fully aware what you pick up is cursed, and if it's blessed, and if it's uncursed. Always helpful to know what you're working with. You gain clarity, like I said, one of the best talents in the game. And you do physical 1 to 8 versus undead. Lots of undead, that's going to proc pretty often, at least once every couple of floors, if not more. Heavy Blade Slash, 4 to 16, 14 to 26 for Heavy Blade. Not terrible, not the best, but it's up there. So for all of that combined, I ranked this in the A plus tier as well. I think this is one of the best Heavy Blades you can use, and on top of that, gives you clarity. Clarity for me is what pushes this over the top. It's similar vein to Magic Resist. Things that give you clarity are just going to be better in my opinion. Another item that is just the best of its kind, Maulfrost. Strong hammer, hits hard, transient slow. Nothing else to talk about with Maulfrost. Next item, Mirror Bright. Heavy armor 2, and it gives you reflection and the ever-elusive clarity. Nothing else to talk about with this item. It takes up your offhand. You can't use it with 2 swords. Can't use it with anything dual wielding. It does take up your offhand, so that's a downside, but you gain reflection and clarity, 2 of the best talents in the game. So for that, I put it in A+. It would be better, in my opinion, if it didn't take up your offhand. So that's kind of a downside, and there's a small speed debuff due to it being a heavy armor item. But other than that, there's really no reason not to use this, unless you already have both of those talents. But it, on one slot, gives you reflection and clarity, which saves you your glasses, saves you your artifact, or not your artifact, sorry, your amulet, saves you rings. There's just this saves you slots that you can use on other things in return for your offhand. Moving on to what I think personally is the best artifact in the game, and it's not close, Miseris. Now you may be thinking, a scroll. What does a scroll do? Why is one of these items not better than Miseris? So let's just read Miseris. For 25 karma, if you read it, it detects gold, gemstones, mithril, and adamantine in a range. at blessed. Uncursed, it'll just detect gold and gemstone, and cursed, it still detects gold. So even cursed, this is still going to work. It's still going to do something. The more important version of this thing's effect is its copy effect. For 500 karma, you can copy any scroll. Any scroll. That's very important. Something else about this. It is not like a shrine. Let's say you're at 499 karma, and you read this. Copy a scroll. Now you're at -1. Shrine you wouldn't be able to use anymore. Shrine you have to go back to positive. What makes Mazaris insane is that you are able to read this at negative karma. You cannot die from negative karma. And on top of that, you can read it even at -1500. At negative maximum karma, or maximum negative karma, however you'd like to say it, you can continue reading Mazaris. The only thing that can happen to you is you get punished. Now that could be bad, but let's say, for example, you're just farming. Let's say you want to max out all of your proficiencies and you have a scroll of training. If you can get yourself punishment like, let's say, wanted, gluttony, something that's not going to affect you if you're not moving, and you're just farming your stuff, you could make infinite of those scrolls just by copying with Mazaris. Having this in your inventory means that anything you can do with a scroll, you can do infinitely. All your equipment, +10, +5, +7, whatever the max is. All your abilities, maxed. You want to just collect every artifact in the game like an insane person? Make a bunch of scrolls of destruction. This item is so good. For a regular run, you're maxing with scrolls of training. You can eat anything with scroll of devour. So you could theoretically make, let's just say, for example, infinite scrolls of enchantment. And then you replicate your scrolls of devouring after that. You eat all your scrolls of enchantment, and now you've maxed your stat line for free. For free. You have maxed your stat line. Because functionally, once you get to -1500, you are reading this item for free. There is nothing bad that can happen to you reading this item. Once you're already punished and you're at -15, there's no downside to reading this item. There's just so many broken combinations of going infinite that Mazaris creates that I honestly hope this item gets patched. I don't think you should be able to use this item if you're below 0 karma. And even then, I think this item's strong. I think you should have to have the 500 karma to use this item. I don't think you should be able to go negative reading this item, even if it's just for one scroll. I think that is ridiculous, and I think that this item, as it stands right now, where it can go infinite, just breaks the game. I think if you find this item in your run should be a leaderboard run, if you wanted to go for it. If you want to go for a leaderboard run, if you have Mazaris, I think you're guaranteed. I don't think there's any way to not hit the leaderboard with Mazaris, because you can literally create every artifact. You can max your stats, you can max your abilities, you can max out your skills. It's just insane. There's nothing this item doesn't do. Moving on. We have Murumasa. It is a medium blade 2-8 slash that gives you berserking and does 1-8 versus living. So versus most enemies, you're getting an extra d8 of damage, so it puts it in line with a heavy blade as a medium blade, and you harm disintegrate 1-8, so you're doing even more damage. Berserking is interesting because it's similar to this in that you don't want to be wielding this near friendly enemies because you risk going into rage, so I would consider it a downside. And on top of that, disintegrate could be bad. If they're holding something you want in their inventory and you slap them with this, it can disintegrate their equipment. I think with this is another item where you're winning any 1v1 encounter, but at a cost. I don't think you're losing a 1v1 encounter if you're holding this and it's, maxed out. I don't think there's going to be much that beats you in a 1v1 encounter, but it comes at a cost. And on top of that, there's one enemy in the game for me that put this below the B tier. I had this in B tier with Blinderog, but I was thinking about it. What is the worst thing that could possibly happen with this item? And it's not even attacking a shopkeeper. A lot of times you're going to be strong enough to fight those guys. doppelgangers are fairly common. If a doppelganger copies you with this item, suddenly that doppelganger has a chance to ruin your day. Start slapping you with Disintegrate and just disintegrating all your items. So for that, I put it in C+. I think you are going to be winning most 1v1 combats, but I don't think that it's necessarily worth it. I think this item is just on the edge of viability. I think if you don't have anything better, like if you have no other options for high damage, then this thing is cool to slap on and just use temporarily, but I don't think you want to keep wielding this item, especially not once you get to floors where you can run into things like doppelgangers or situations where there are friendly enemies you don't want to turn on you if you're in a town, or if you're next to several friendly enemies that are of mid-strength, and if you slap one, you're going to turn the whole crowd, and now you're surrounded. It's just not worth having equipped to me. Moving on to the Philosopher's Stone. Philosopher's Stone is what I said earlier is the better of the two artifact amulets. Philosopher's Stone is going to give you life regen, vitality, and slow digestion. So slow digestion offsetting the life regen and vitality. You can summon a homunculus, which is not that great. And for the cost of 1 life, you can transmute items to gold. So it's sort of like having Midas Touch. It's good for if you're farming fame. But even better than that, I think just life regen vitality combination is just a very strong amulet. And for that, I ranked it in the A+ tier, just above Aethiopica. Moving on to Prudentia. Prudentia is a great light source. You gain Reflection and Warning, like I've said already, 2 of the best talents. And you can scry. You can search for stocks. Just has an upside. Light Radius of 2, another minor upside. I put this item in the A+ tier as the top of A+. I think it's just a very good light source. I think it's much better than Illuminaire. Moving on to an interesting item, the Raven Bow. Burst rate 2 on a bow, so it's similar to the Harbalist. You gain Telepathy, good talent. You gain Invisible, and you gain Searching. And it's only got a 1 to 6 damage. Now, these are all good. These are good abilities, but thinking about it, most of the classes that you're going to be using this on already have 1 or more of those talents built in. So you're really not gaining all 3 unless you were to train this up on a class that wouldn't normally use it. Or, something like Samurai can take advantage of this pretty heavily. But it's also not the strongest. I think they're just better items to use. This combined with Deadwood creates a deadly combination for not very much weight. This thing only weighs 3 pounds. I think it's better than every other bow in the game. And for that, it should go here. But I do think it has enough upside to push it to just inside of A+ tier. Moving on, we have Rosenthrall. Rosenthrall is a pretty meh item in my opinion. It is a zap with charm. It is an artifact that does something that you can do in a million other ways. I think if you find this in place of any other item, you're going to be disappointed. So for that, I threw it in the C+ tier. I think it's just outside of viability. If it did something better, if it charmed for more turns, maybe it would be good, but as it stands, it's kind of just a get out of jail free card. Moving on, Rune Sword. Rune Sword is 1 to 6 Heavy Blade Slash, boost damage by enchantment, and it does 2 to 12 Drain versus Orcs, which is a little funny. I don't think it's super strong. I think it's just another one of those items that there are better items to use than the Rune Sword. I think there are better items that do more damage, that have better side effects. See the other 2 swords in the A+ tier. Sun Sword, same vein. I'm not a big fan of Blind. I think Blind is just... And if you're winning the combat, Blind doesn't help you because you were already winning the combat, and now you've got an enemy that could just run off on you because he can't see you. I don't think Blind's very strong. I think Blind does more to a human player than it does to NPCs. It's more annoying for us than it is for them. And then it doesn't really... It does fire versus undead, but like who cares? It already only does 1 to 8. There's so much stronger items. You gotta think, this is a heavy blade that does 1 to 8. This thing's doing like 4 to 16. What do you really want, right? And it doesn't give any resistances. It doesn't give fire resist. It'd be cool if it gave fire resist, right? Like slap 100% fire resist on this thing, boom, A tier. But it doesn't have anything. Doesn't do anything. Bad item. Moving on to the only other item that I think in the game is S plus tier, Teleria. Teleria is insane. Teleria would be the best artifact in the game if Mazeris got nerfed. It doesn't allow you to go infinite or anything, so it's not Mazeris. Mazeris honestly should just be in its own tier. Like, I should do this, add a row above, label it, you know, a different color. Name this the S plus tier. Put Teleria here, because there is a distinction between Teleria and the items below it, and then this is just Mazeris. I think that looks a lot nicer. I think that makes a lot more sense and shows my thoughts a lot more clearly. Teleria gives you quickness, flight, stealth, and boost your speed by enchantment, and it's on a light armor. So you're going to go light armor 11, plus you can have your dexterity really high. So you're getting full dexterity modifier because it's a light armor. You get quickness, which is one of the best talents in the game. If you don't have quickness built in, this is the best way to get quickness. You get flight, so you're ignoring half the traps in the game. You can fly over holes. Flight just never a bad thing to have. You can always pick things up. It's not like levitate where you can't touch things. There's not a downside to flying. There's no ceiling traps. Stealth is just a good bonus, and then where these really shine is with the combination of quickness and boost speed by enchantment. At plus 10, you are going to be zipping through the dungeon, hitting 3-4 times in a turn versus any enemy in the game. There's not much enemies are going to be doing against Teleria. They're interesting, but like they're good, but there's nothing interesting about them. They are just good. Moving on, the hero. Hero is interesting. You eat it for basically being satiated every time. It replenishes life if it's blessed, but then it teleports away from you, so you have to go find it. I think that this item is just a solid B tier item. I think once you get to the point in the game where you're on floor like 20 plus, food no longer really matters. You're going to be finding corpses and things that you can eat. If you can eat this. If you can eat this, you can eat most corpses. I think this only helps like vegetarians. I don't even know if you can eat this as a vegetarian. I haven't checked. It's just solid food until you start finding the best foods. Moving on to what I think is the second worst artifact, Veramissus. This is a hammer that weighs 50 pounds, so it is taking up insane inventory space. Has heavy armor 8 on it, goes to heavy armor 18, so you're getting 18 to 20 armor out of it, sure. But it takes up both hands, gives you a speed debuff. On top of that, you have an attack mod of -2 for 2 to 8 damage. You can exchange, which it's a range of 10, and it repels things away from you. So you can push things away from you and give them slowness, which is just okay. The problem with this is I think that you're more likely to just exchange. I think you're more likely to just keep this and use it as an exchange to start a combat with a stronger item. But is it really worth carrying around 50 pounds for that? And I would say no. I don't even carry this. This is one of the few artifacts that I don't carry. If I'm playing a run for fame, I leave this somewhere and pick it up at the end of the run for the fame. I do not carry this around for the entire run. Even with Blessed Bag of Holding, I don't carry this thing around. Moving on to a much cooler artifact that starts with a V. Voltaic. 4 to 14 spear, wield in both hands. Transient stunned for 6 to 11 when blessed, and 4 to 9 when uncursed. Very good item. Can't use it cursed, backfire stunned, but just very strong item. 4 to 14 goes to 14 to 24 with stun on it. Easily a very strong item. I don't think it's as good as Drill Lands, but it's easily in the A+ tier. Better than all the items that you just used because they're items. Moving on to an item that I had a really hard time ranking, because it really depends. I put it here. Bottom of S tier. Really, I should have another tier, but I don't like breaking up this many tiers already. Really, there should be like an S- tier for this item, and it should be there by itself. Heavy Blade, one-handed, 1 to 8 damage. Not that strong, right? But versus Jabberwock and Vorpal Jabberwock, you are 100% of the time going to one-hit kill them. Every time, no matter what. If you make contact with a Jabberwock or a Vorpal Jabberwock, you kill them. Vorpal Jabberwock is one of the strongest enemies in the game, arguably top 1, top 2 enemy in the game. So, in literally just outing them for free is enough to put this item here by itself. On top of that, it does damage, so it would go here by itself. And then it also has another upside of 10% of the time when blessed, 5% unblessed, you are decapitating whatever enemy you hit. Any enemy with a head. Pretty good. I think that this is just a strong item overall. You can offhand it if you really want to have a stronger item in your main, so it's good in the offhand, good in the main hand. Something I like to do is replicate this and wield 1 blessed and 1 replicate, which gives you a 10% and a 5% chance when you hit with both to decapitate. Strong item. Very strong item. Like I said, I don't think it's as good as these items, these 4, and especially not these 2, but I think it is better than all of the A+ items. Last one for this video, the Witherlock. Witherlock is a slap them in the face and drain their health. If they're undead, you charm them for a million bazillion turns. It's 10,000 turns. It has a zap range, does decreased karma on zap. And so you pay 101, do 150 karma to animate a Revenant. Pretty cool. Not the best. Could be better. I think this item just solid B tier item. Not much more to talk about with that, but overall, that is my list for the artifacts in Nethack Pathos. Let me know what you guys think. If you would move anything around, how you feel about my hot takes like Escapist and Drill Lands being S tier. I think those are my 2 hottest takes. I think some people may have a problem with Veramissus and Rosenthrall. But yeah, overall, I think my list is pretty solid. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. See ya.